Black belt instructor. As an officer, do you feel that in general that LEOs operate in a place of complacency and that they think, oh, I'm good enough, or I have these tools, or I'll be fine? And that sort of prevents them from learning a new skill such as jiu-jitsu to possibly reduce lethality.
I would say, yeah, definitely.
Oh, do you want to give him the mic for a second?
I would say definitely complacency. They say complacency kills, and I think over time, the older you get, and the more you're in, for example, like the law enforcement profession, of course, like, you become more complacent and stuff, and you start maybe neglecting any type of training that can, prevent you from having to resort to like an impact weapon or like a less lethal or even like a lethal force situation. A lot of the, that's not to say, sometimes that stuff's called for, of course, because you can't take fists to like a gunfight, right? But I would say a lot of the times, a lot of scenarios could be resolved with the least amount of force, and obviously I think training jiu-jitsu would help you achieve that by controlling like combative subjects, violent people. But I would say definitely there's people in the law enforcement field that become complacent over time, and they neglect the value that jiu-jitsu can offer them. So.
Same question to you, Sapal. As an instructor of numerous, over the many years, over numerous LEOs, what would you have to add to that as far as like officer complacency? Maybe the officer that walks in off the street, who then after a short amount of time, they go, you know what, I was wrong, or I've changed my perspective. Or
I think that's individually, because I've talked to some LEOs, and I think that the majority of them rely on their duty belts and what's on it versus their hands, because everything arrest-wise is your, because like everything, I mean, he could speak to it more than I can, but each level of force has to be one step above the perpetrator or whatever you want to call it.
What is that called?
And it's called use of force continuum. He's 100% right.
Use of force continuum?
Yeah. So you try to resolve. Sorry, if you try,
you're good.
You try to resolve everything at the least amount of force
required.
That's required. But like Coach Sapal was saying, you always want to be one step or one level above the threat. Someone comes at you with a knife. Well, you know what? You're going to bring a gun to the knife fight, because at the end of the day, you want to win, right? Someone is throwing punches at you and stuff like that. That may call for an impact tool. But if you're going to just be in a combat situation, like hand to hand and stuff like that, I would say if you can close the distance, and then you mitigate like strikes, and then you start using grappling control, you take it to the floor, like Coach Powell was saying. I would say 100% of arrest scenarios that end up in handcuffing, you have to, it's close quarter, So.
Yeah. So I think with that, I think a lot of false sense of security when these guys go through with the academy. Not that I've been through it, obviously, but I've had like PAG, explain some of the stuff that they do. Costa's going through the academy. The reason he came in when he first came in is because I'm at the time your role was to teach, right?
Yeah, so I was they call it defensive tactic instructor.
Right, same as PAG, defensive tactic instructor. And I remember the words he said. He's like, I'm doing that. He's like, but I feel like I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
Right.
And that's why I'm here. I remember that when he came in, he's like, yeah, I'm so-and-so. I work at this place. And he had told me.
Phony maybe a little bit?
Well, I was told, actually, so I went up north to Northern California, and then the people that inspired me, some of them were brown belts, some of them were black belts, and they were instructors of an arrest and control class. And then they said something that really resonated. And they said, you can't be, teaching someone something in like grappling, for example, or arrest and control stuff without actually training training yourself in a discipline. And that's what actually brought me to jiu-jitsu, because I felt like I would have been a phony. I would have been preaching, X, Y, Z, and here I am, like, not training. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think that's where in the academy, the stuff that they have them do, and the 1 week of the actual training that they do, they get a false sense of security because they got some good PRs in the gym. They look physically great, some of them, not the donut lords, but there's some good. There's some out there that have that, but they're really rigid in their walk, and they're like, oh, I can, hold someone down. But when you see those videos online, sometimes those resisting arrest scenarios go on, even if there's no weapon involved, they go on for a minute, 2 minutes, and those big muscles,
require a lot of oxygen.
A lot of oxygen, exactly. So
Ronnie Coleman looked good in uniform, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sure dudes like that, like, they get gassed out.
Yeah, and I think that's where that false sense of security, like, because you can bench press 225 20 times, they think you're strong. Well, how long can you hold that strength? There's in a street or in a live scenario, there's no max repetition. You can set it back up. It's go for your life. It's no time limit. Yeah,
it's under control.
Right. In jiu-jitsu, sometimes we go, oh, shut off the clock. Let's go. So, you got the clock watch. You're like, when's the clock gonna start? Sometimes it's terrible, but sometimes you gotta just abuse yourself like that to get in that mental frame. Like, hey, I gotta learn to roll with control and efficiency, and let them wear themselves out, because I don't know how long this can go. So that's the one thing that a lot of these guys, and I think some of them that I talk to, it comes down to laziness, or they don't think it's important enough to pay for something like that. They want to
resort to the duty belt.
Yeah, resort to the duty belt. And even then, you're more likely to use your hands than your duty belt, statistically speaking.
Yeah, I would say
right?
a lot of
most interactions, right?
Yeah, most interactions could be resolved by, like, a simple, like, control hold, or if it gets to be combative with her strikes and stuff. I mean, if you close the distance, close the gap, you mitigate the striking, and then it becomes a control, grappling scenario.
Right, and hopefully you got some good cardio and good technique to last. Because you don't know who you're going against. They may be high, those types of things. And I think a lot of times I've heard too, I don't know, you can speak to this, a lot of guys in the LEO be like, oh, because they work long hours, right? Like those doctor hours, 14, 16 hours, if they're on the streets or whatever. So a lot of them like, oh, I'm too old for it, or, we just did a question of the week, oh, I'm too old for jiu-jitsu. I hear that a lot from LEOs. So like, oh, I used to do it back in the day, but now I'm too old. And I truly believe, when I look at their bodies and they tell me that, it's either they're extremely out of shape, or the second one is they're extremely in shape but really rigid, because they do biceps every other day. So that physically they look great, but when it comes to dexterity and stuff like that, they can barely move.
I agree. Just because, like we were saying earlier, just because you have, like, muscles and stuff doesn't necessarily mean that you could come out on top of the fight.
Yeah.
I don't know why I think there's, like, a false sense of security, or there's, like, a false perception that people who are jacked and stuff can fight and that type of thing. Like, you're saying, if you're not flexible and you can't move and stuff, then what good are you? Some people are built for show, and other people are built to go.
All show and no go.
All show, no go.
When you first came in, not saying that you had a false sense of security or whatever, but do you feel like you experienced maybe like a harsh sense of reality that first roll, where you're like,
oh yeah,
oh whoa?
I mean, yeah, for sure.
What was that like for you?
I mean, you definitely are.
I mean, because you're an in-shape guy,
right.
You look good.
Thanks.
I mean,
I would say
I'm married, but
it's definitely it was like humbling. Even like now, 3 years, whatever it is, like later, you still get humbled, but with that humbling comes a sense of realizing, okay, there's stuff for me to learn, and that's okay. Like it's okay to admit, you're not the best, or that you need training in something. And I think a lot of dudes in the law enforcement field, there's a very it's a very alpha field. You know, no one wants to admit that they can get submitted by someone who's, I don't know, we'll say like 150 pounds when you're like jacked. And
Or
stuff
do you
like that.
think that they don't want to believe that they're not an alpha without that belt?
Yeah, there you go.
They don't want to admit that. Do you think that could be some of it?
Oh yeah, for sure, 100%.
Because like as soon as you take this thing off and then the belt's off, what do you got?
Yeah, and that's it.
You know, and it's not to talk smack about, because there's a lot of law officers that LEOs that have his mentality that get in the mix. Then there's some that could be too timid, or they have that mentality of I'm an alpha only when I have my belt on or this on or whatever the case may be. But like, how would you like go about like encouraging them? Like, hey, like it's not as bad as you think. A lot of guys have those horror stories of going to the wrong type of gym that won't introduce the skill set to you in the proper manner. Because you can't just go in there gun blazing and expect to like not get injured or not. You have to have the right academy and the right, I guess, introduction to it.
I mean, I would say definitely finding the right school is very important in someone continuing with it. I would say to any law enforcement, whoever's in
Like on the fence about it.
Yeah, whoever's like, in doubt if they can do it or not, I would say just of course like try it and stuff. Don't be afraid to put that badge down and then look at yourself and then be like, hey, do I have something that I can take from it? Of course, there's always going to be a bigger, badder fish than you, right?
Right. Even for me too.
Yeah, there's always someone out there who can beat you and stuff. But with like defeat and stuff like that comes like knowledge, and then the more you learn, then the more tools you can put on that belt that you can use. Right?
As you started training till now, like along your journey, even when you go visit places, like when you go on vacation and stuff, obviously they may not know you're an LEO, but like, do you feel like most people, when they find out you're an LEO, they're more willing to help you and guide you versus the opposite? Oh, he's a cop, I'm gonna beat his ass type stuff. Some people might have that misconception about it too.
I would say that there's definitely people are like willing to help you and stuff. I would say that like in the martial art arena, I would say definitely.
Do you think that's a general fear of officers? Is like, if I go into this gym, if I tell anyone I'm a cop, they're gonna try to fuck me up. Do you think that's something that crosses the mind of officers when they walk into a gym, or what may stop them from going into a gym?
I mean, I would say there's definitely like reservations that come with you telling like someone that type of stuff. Obviously, I especially like in this day and age where there's been a lot of scrutiny in the law enforcement community and stuff. And I don't know. I like to think people wouldn't want to hurt you just because you're in whatever occupation you're in and stuff like that. But I think it gets back to what we were saying earlier. You have to find the right gym. You know what I mean? A lot of it comes like having to find the right gym. The group of people that are in the gym are going to dictate that.
Like they trust each other. That they're not going. Everybody's getting to work tomorrow. No one's going to go compete against Gordon Ryan next week.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So I think that whole trusting is a big thing as far as like communicating amongst one another. If we all have that same mentality in your team or in that training room, then you have no worries about getting hurt and stuff like that.
Yeah. And I would say, definitely here. This has become my home and stuff. I've never felt someone wanted to hurt me and stuff just because whatever it is I do. For a living. So, going back to what we were saying, the gym that you're in has a huge factor in that. So I definitely would invite any LEOs to come to this gym. 100%. Hashtag here, enter plug. Yeah. Like, subscribe.
And did you see that article that came out like 2-3 weeks ago? San Bernardino is like considered the second or the third like most violent city in the United States or in California.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I noticed
we're in the heart of it right here.
Per capita, it hits a lot of lists that are not good.
Yeah, we're on all the lists.
Yeah, even PAG too. When it comes to his departments in probation, he deals with the grown-ups, he deals with the kids.
Yeah.
It's still high up there.
Yeah.
All around. Even your line of work, you pretty sure you dealt with a lot of same stuff.
All the time.
you know, but I don't know. Hopefully it resonates with some of these LEOs, man, and get them in there.
Hopefully we start seeing more on the mat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Across the country.
It makes it easy because we fly that flag out front too. So.
Yeah.
Hey, that's a come one and come all
Yeah.
invitation, right?
Yeah.
The blue flag. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
All right.
All right, thank you.